My sister, the golden child, was a celebrated author and a complete fraud. As she smiled for the cameras at her success party, I held the folder that would expose her lifetime of lies, and I knew that tearing her down meant tearing my entire family apart. The moment was approaching. On a small stage, bathed in warm light, Leah sat beside a journalist conducting a public interview. The microphone gave a slight squeal as the journalist adjusted it. "And finally, Dr. Vance," she said, her voice projecting across the ballroom, "your novel, The Salt-Stained Spire, feels so deeply authentic to its time and place. What was the most surprising piece of historical research you uncovered that truly brought the world to life for you?" Leah, my sister, smiled her perfectly calibrated, charming smile. The lights caught the sequins on her dress, scattering stars across the adoring faces of her publisher, her agent, her new Hollywood partners, and our parents, who sat in the front row, looking as if they might actually burst with pride. "That's a wonderful question," Leah began, her voice smooth and practiced. "You know, the truth is often stranger than fiction. I spent years in the archives, and I found that the emotional core of the story came from a book," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the expectant hush of the room. I was standing near the center aisle, and every head turned towards me. The black folder in my hands felt impossibly heavy. The journalist squinted, momentarily confused. "I'm sorry?" Leah's smile tightened. "Maya, please," she said, a nervous laugh in her voice. "This isn't the time." My mother shot me a look of pure fury from the front row. My father was already starting to rise from his chair, his expression a thundercloud. I ignored them all and opened the folder. My hands were steady. I had rehearsed this. "I'd like to read a short passage," I announced to the room. "This is from page 47 of An Unremembered Coast, a local history self-published in 1978 by a man named Alastair Finch." I cleared my throat and read. "The lighthouse keeper, a man weathered by solitude, did not fear the winter gales. He feared the creeping silence that followed, a quiet so profound it threatened to swallow the sound of his own heart, leaving him a ghost in his own life before he had even died." A confused murmur went through the crowd. My words hung in the air, plain and unadorned. "And now," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "from page 92 of the best-selling novel, The Salt-Stained Spire, by Dr. Amelia Vance." I shifted my gaze to my sister, whose face had lost all its color. Her protagonist, a lighthouse keeper, thinks to himself, "He did not fear the punishing gales of winter. He feared the silence that crept in after the storm passed, a quiet so complete it threatened to consume the very beat of his own heart, turning him into a ghost in his own life long before his body gave out." The silence in that ballroom was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The journalist's professional smile was gone, replaced by an expression of sharp, intense focus. Leah's hand was at her throat, her knuckles white. My mother was on her feet, her mouth open in a silent scream of rage directed at me. This wasn't a sudden storm that appeared out of nowhere. It was the breaking of a dam, the final, catastrophic failure of a structure that had been cracking and groaning under the pressure for 15 years. To understand the wreckage, to comprehend the full scope of the flood, you have to go back to the beginning. The beginning was a high school history paper. I was 15, a bookish sophomore who preferred the company of dead authors to most of my living classmates. Leah, a senior, was the opposite, popular, effervescent, and effortlessly brilliant. Or so it seemed. She had just won the prestigious countywide history award for her essay on local maritime trade in the 19th century. Our parents had framed the certificate and hung it in the hallway. I was reading a dense, academic book on that very subject, one I'd checked out from the library for my own interest. As I read a chapter on the decline of the whaling industry, a paragraph struck me as familiar. I got up, pulled Leah's award-winning essay from the pile on her desk. She'd left it there, basking in its own glory, and laid it beside the book. It was identical, not similar, not inspired by. It was a word-for-word transcription of a complex analytical paragraph. I felt a strange, cold feeling in my stomach. I took the book and the essay to her room where she was on the phone, laughing with a friend. "Leah," I said, waiting for her to finish. "What is it, Maya?" I'm busy. She waved a dismissive hand. I held out the open book and her paper. This paragraph in your essay, it's the same as this one in the book. She glanced at it, her expression not changing. Oh, that. Yeah, it's a great point, isn't it? I thought it really summed things up well. You can't just take it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. That's plagiarism. Leah finally hung up the phone and gave me a pitying look. Oh, Maya, don't be so dramatic. It's called research. You find good sources and you use them. That's how it works. You didn't cite it. You didn't use quotes. You just copied it. It's one paragraph in a 10-page paper, she scoffed. Relax. You're just jealous because I won and you spend all your time with your nose buried in dusty books nobody cares about. The accusation stung, but the casualness of her deception was what truly bewildered me. Feeling like I was losing my mind, I went to our parents. I sat them down in the living room and carefully explained what I had found. I showed them the book, the essay. My father looked at the pages, then at me, his brow furrowed in disappointment. Maya, your sister worked very hard on that paper. But she cheated, I insisted. It's right here. That's a very ugly word, my mother said, taking the essay from my father and placing it on the coffee table as if it were a sacred text. Amelia is a gifted writer. It's not surprising that her ideas might sound similar to those of a professional historian. Great minds think alike. It's not similar, Mom. It's the same words. Stop it, my father said, his voice firm. We are so proud of what your sister has accomplished. It is deeply upsetting that you would try to tear her down like this. An apology to your sister would be appropriate. You need to learn to be happy for her success, not look for ways to undermine it. I looked from my mother's disapproving face to my father's stern one. In their eyes, Leah's success was a fact, and my truth was an inconvenience, a nasty little bug to be squashed. I was the problem. My jealousy was the problem. The evidence in my hands meant nothing. That was the first lesson, and I learned it well. Be quiet. Don't make trouble. Don't question the golden child. I went to my room, and I didn't apologize. A wall went up between Leah and me that day, a silent, invisible barrier built of her lie and my silence truth. The pattern, once established, became the blueprint for our family's life. Throughout college, Leah's academic star continued to rise, and with it, my private library of her deceptions grew. It became a morbid hobby of mine. She'd email me a paper to proofread, a performative act of sisterly collaboration, and I would find the telltale signs. The sudden shift in tone, the paragraph of prose far too sophisticated for her usual style. One semester, she was taking a tough philosophy course. A week before her final paper was due, she was out at parties every night. Yet, she turned in a 15-page paper on Kant's categorical imperative that earned her an A. Later, while helping her clean out her laptop files, I found a folder labeled MISC. Inside was a receipt from an online essay writing service. The topic, price, and date matched her philosophy paper perfectly. I sat there, staring at the screen, the proof, absolute and digital. My first instinct, the old high school reflex, was to print it out and march into the living room. But what was the point? I could already hear my mother's voice. Maya, why were you snooping through your sister's private files? She was under a lot of stress. Sometimes bright students need a little help organizing their thoughts. My father's response would be simpler. Pure, cold anger at my violation of Leah's privacy. The truth of the matter, the cheating, would be irrelevant. The focus would be on my transgression in discovering it. So I said nothing. I dragged the file to the trash bin on her desktop and emptied it. But the knowledge stayed with me, another brick in the wall. I saw her through a different lens. I watched her charm professors, expertly weaving narratives of all-night study sessions and intellectual breakthroughs, all while I knew she was outsourcing her intellectual labor. Her gaslighting became an art form. Once, I obliquely mentioned the difficulty of a literature class she was taking, saying I'd heard the professor was a stickler for original analysis. Oh, It's not hard if you actually do the reading and have a feel for the material, she'd replied, giving me a pointed look, as if I were the one who took shortcuts. She built a fortress of lies around herself, and our parents served as its willing guards. Their investment in her brilliance was too total. To admit Leah was a fraud would be to admit their own judgment, their own parenting, was a failure. It was easier to believe I was a bitter, jealous sibling. The silence became a habit, a survival mechanism. I went to my own state school, worked hard, got my degree in English literature, and then my teaching certificate. I found a quiet satisfaction in my work, in teaching teenagers the importance of finding their own voice, of citing their sources, of building an argument with integrity. Every lecture on plagiarism felt like a small, private act of rebellion. Then came the PhD. Leah, of course, had sailed into a prestigious doctoral program. Her dissertation on obscure female poets of the Victorian era was lauded as a groundbreaking piece of scholarship, the day she officially became Doctor. Amelia Vance, my parents threw a massive party. The whole extended family was there, along with her university colleagues and professors. Toasts were made. My father wept openly as he spoke of her genius and dedication. My mother stood beside her, beaming, holding her arm as if presenting a trophy to the world. I stood in the back, nursing a glass of champagne, feeling like a ghost. Later in the evening, Leah found me by the fireplace. She was glowing, holding court, and she graced me with her presence. "Maya," she said, her voice dripping with magnanimity, "I'm so glad you could make it." "Of course," I said. "Congratulations, Leah. It's a huge achievement." "It is," she agreed, taking a sip of her own drink. "You know, as a high school teacher, you do important work, laying the foundation. But it's different, isn't it? The level of engagement with the material." She leaned in, as if sharing a profound secret. "Someday, when you've had a chance to really grapple with literary theory on a deeper level, you'll understand the kind of work that goes into something like this. It's a different world." And there it was, not just the lie, but the contempt, the condescension. In her mind, I wasn't just the jealous sister. I was a simpleton, a lesser being who couldn't possibly comprehend the lofty peaks where she resided. She wasn't just cheating to get by. She was cheating and then using her fraudulent success to look down on me, on my life, on my genuine, hard-won passion for the very field she was desecrating. That was the moment the years of quiet resentment hardened into something else. It was no longer just about her lies. It was about the integrity of everything I believed in. The wall between us, which I had simply maintained, I now felt a grim desire to tear down. The habit of silence was broken. I didn't know how or when, but I knew I was done being quiet. The opportunity arrived 2 years later, gift-wrapped in a glossy dust jacket. The Salt-Stained Spire was Leah's debut novel, the triumphant pivot from academia to commercial fiction. It was an instant, runaway success. The reviews were ecstatic. "A stunning new voice in historical fiction," one critic raved. "Vance's prose is as lyrical as it is meticulously researched." My parents bought 20 copies. They gave them to everyone they knew. The book was optioned for a movie before it had even been out for 6 months. I bought my own copy. I read it in one sitting, a knot in my stomach tightening with every page. It was well constructed, the plot compelling. But then I got to a chapter describing a local shipwreck, a specific event from our hometown's history. Leah described the way the surviving sailors were cared for by the townswomen, using a peculiar turn of phrase about mending soles as well as socks. It pinged a memory, faint and distant. It wasn't from a famous history book. It was something else. The condescending look on Leah's face at her PhD party flashed in my mind. The hunt began. I started where the story was set, in the digital archives of our hometown's local library. I spent my weekends and evenings scrolling through microfiche of old newspapers, searching for phrases, for names, for anything. I cross-referenced ship manifests and town records. It was a compulsion, a mission, fueled by a decade and a half of silenced truth. After 3 weeks of dead ends, I found a reference in a 1980s newspaper article about local historians. It mentioned a man named Alistair Finch, a retired postman who had spent his life collecting stories about the coastline and had self-published a book. The title was An Unremembered Coast. It had a print run of only 200 copies. Finding that book became my obsession. It wasn't in any library system. Online booksellers had never heard of it. I finally tracked down Alistair Finch's granddaughter, a woman in her 70s living 2 states away. I called her, explained I was a teacher researching local history, and asked if she might have a copy of her grandfather's book. She was delighted someone remembered him. A week later, a small, carefully wrapped package arrived. I opened it on my kitchen table. The book was thin, with a simple blue cover, and inside, I found it all. Not just the line about mending souls as well as socks. I found entire character archetypes. A stoic lighthouse keeper haunted by a past failure. A fiercely independent woman who runs a small shop and defies convention. A corrupt town official. The central plot, a story of smuggling and betrayal set against the backdrop of a declining fishing industry, was all there, laid out in Finch's plain, unadorned prose. Leah had done more than plagiarize a few passages. She had taken this man's life's work, this forgotten, obscure little book, and treated it as her personal outline. She had dressed up Finch's simple sentences in her lyrical prose, added a few subplots, and called it her own. She had stolen not just words, but a world, a soul. I spent the next 2 nights at my desk with a scanner and a highlighter. I created a document, a damning side-by-side comparison. On the left, Finch's humble text. On the right, Leah's celebrated prose. The similarities were structural, thematic, and linguistic. It was undeniable. I had the proof. A folder full of it. For a week, the folder sat on my desk. I would pick it up, feel its weight, and then put it down again. What was I doing? This wasn't a high school history paper anymore. This was my sister's entire life. A best-selling novel, a movie deal, her reputation as a public intellectual. Exposing this would not just knock her off a pedestal. It would shatter her. It would destroy my parents, who had wrapped their own identities so tightly around her success. It would be a detonation from which our family would never recover. Was it justice? Or was it a revenge 15 years in the making? Was I doing this for Alistair Finch, a man I'd never met? Or was I doing it for the 15-year-old girl who was told to apologize for telling the truth? I couldn't separate the motives. They were tangled together, a knot of righteous anger and personal pain. The invitation to the movie deal party arrived. It was to be held in the grand ballroom of a downtown hotel. It was a celebration of her greatest lie, and I knew, with a certainty that left no room for doubt, that I was going to go. I put the folder in my bag. The time for silence was over, which brings us back to the ballroom. My final words, quoting my sister's theft, echoed in the stunned silence. Leah was stammering now, trying to form a defense. That's absurd. Thematic resonance. Common historical sources, she managed, looking pleadingly at her agent, a sharp-faced man whose expression had gone from celebratory to horrified. The publisher, standing beside him, looked like he'd been punched. It's more than resonance, Leah, I said, my voice cold and even. It's dozens of pages. It's the plot. It's the characters. My father finally reached me. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in. You have done enough, he hissed, his face contorted with rage. You will leave now. She's a liar, my mother shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. She was addressing the whole room now, her voice cracking with emotion. She has always been jealous of her sister. Always. This is a pathetic, desperate cry for attention. People were backing away, whispering to each other, pulling out their phones. The party was collapsing in on itself. The journalist, the one who had asked the innocent question, had her notepad out and was writing furiously. I have copies of everything, I said, looking directly at the journalist, ignoring my father's grip on my arm. The original book, a side-by-side analysis. My contact information is on the first page. Get out, my father roared, and he began to physically pull me toward the exit. The commotion was the final nail in the coffin of the celebration. I didn't resist. I let him drag me through the crowd of shocked faces. I saw my sister one last time, surrounded by her crumbling empire, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. I had done it. I had burned everything to the ground. As my father shoved me out the ballroom doors into the hallway, I felt nothing, just a profound and terrifying emptiness. The next morning, the war began. My phone was a weapon turned against me. 100 texts from my mother, a stream of consciousness of rage, betrayal, and grief. You have destroyed this family. How could you be so cruel? You are no daughter of mine. My father was more succinct, a single message: do not contact us again. Leah sent one text. It was simple and venomous. I hope you're happy. You've ruined my life. I wasn't happy. I was sitting in my small, quiet apartment. The silence, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. Online, the first articles were appearing. Family drama at author's celebration. Sister accuses best-selling novelist of plagiarism. It was still being framed as a spat, a personal vendetta. But then the journalist from the party called. I've read what you sent over, she said, her voice all business. I've also had a researcher working overnight to verify the existence of Alistair Finch's book. This is a credible allegation, Ms. Vance. A very credible one. My paper is running with it, a full exposé. And so the unraveling began. The journalist's story was picked up by national news outlets. The publisher announced a formal, internal investigation. The phrase, the salt-stained spire, started trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. Digital sleuths, armed with the details from the article, began their own work. It was an avalanche. Once the charge of plagiarism had been leveled and stuck, people started looking at Leah's other work. A professor from her graduate program wrote a blog post pointing out suspicious similarities between a chapter in Leah's dissertation and a little-known academic journal from the 1980s. Within a week, her entire academic career was under scrutiny. Her PhD was a house of cards, and the wind was howling. The official consequences came swiftly. The publisher's investigation concluded in less than a month. They issued a public statement confirming significant and extensive plagiarism. They retracted the salt-stained spire, pulling all copies from shelves. They announced they were suing Leah for the return of her advance and for damages to their reputation. The movie studio immediately canceled the deal, citing a morals clause in her contract. Dr. Amelia Vance, the brilliant literary star, was gone. In her place was Leah Vance, the fraud, the cheat, the national punchline. A month after the party, I drove to my parents' house. I don't know what I was hoping for. An explanation? A chance to make them understand my reasoning? I parked on the street, not in the driveway, and walked to the front door. My mother answered. She looked older. When she saw me, her face, which had been set in a neutral expression of fatigue, hardened into a mask of stone. "What do you want?" she asked. "I just wanted to talk," I said. "There's nothing to talk about," she replied, her voice flat and devoid of all warmth. "You made your statement at the party. We all heard you." I wanted to explain why. "We don't need your explanations," my father's voice boomed from inside. He appeared behind my mother, his presence filling the doorway. "You had a choice, Maya. You could have chosen your family. You could have chosen to be happy for your sister. Instead, you chose to destroy her. To destroy us. Our friends won't even look us in the eye. We are humiliated. All because of your spite." "She lied," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "For years. About everything. It wasn't just the book, the PhD, college, all of it. The truth had to come out." "The truth?" my mother said with a bitter laugh. "Your truth has cost your sister her career, her future. It has cost us our daughter. I hope you're proud of your truth. Now please go. You are not welcome here." As she started to close the door, I saw Leah. She was sitting on the stairs in the dim hallway behind them. She looked thin, defeated. She just stared at me, her eyes hollow. There was no remorse in them, only blame. The same look she'd given me when I was 15, magnified 1,000 times. She had learned nothing. The door shut, the lock clicking into place. It was a sound of absolute finality. I stood on the porch for a long time before turning around and walking back to my car. I had lost them. All of them. So here I am, in the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by books that were written with integrity. I have my truth. I have my principles. And that is all I have. My sister is a public pariah, facing lawsuits, and a future she never planned for. My parents have erased me from their lives. The family I grew up in is gone, and I am the one who lit the match. I did the right thing. I believe that. The truth matters. Integrity matters. But when I look at the wreckage, at the pain I've caused, at the complete and utter devastation of the people I am supposed to love, I have to ask myself. I sit here at my computer, the anonymous glow of the screen lighting my face, and I type the question that echoes in the silence of my life. AITA, for exposing my golden child, sister's long history of plagiarism, even though it's tearing my family apart?